Tonight, we have 5 stories, from stories involving cosplay, cryptids, demons, and more. A huge thank you to all of tonight's writers. Remember to send in your story if you'd like to have it featured. You can either submit it at my subreddit, r/slumberreads, or my email you can find in the description. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoy. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Cosplay is a word formed from the words costume and play. It is a type of performance art that involves individuals dressing up as their favorite characters from movies, TV, video games, or literature. Many people are involved in this cosplay trend. Some even become famous models, even working with the companies that made the characters they dress up as. Though this might seem like a harmless trend, I recently discovered the darker side of cosplay, and that humans aren't the only ones who love to cosplay. In the mid of spring, I was given the chance to attend a convention being hosted in the city. My 2 friends Henry and Michael had planned to go to the con for the 3 days it was being held, but unfortunately Michael had to cancel as something happened in his family that needed to be taken care of. He offered me his ticket. I didn't want to go, but after Henry begged not wanting to go alone, I agreed to join. I mean, why not? It's an already paid ticket, and I didn't have anything else to do for the 3 days. Man, that place was an experience. Like I said, I'm not really into these types of things, but going there, seeing all these people dressed up and chit-chatting about different things was something. I couldn't make heads or tails of the things I saw. My buddy Henry, on the other hand, was so winded up like a Jack Russell Terrier. He went around asking for photographs with some of the people dressed up. He dragged me everywhere on that first day. Later in the day, I managed to have some luck. My friend overheard there was going to be a special promotion for some new show, and quickly ran off with the crowd of people. Finally, I get to sit down. My legs sluggishly dragged me over to the bench. I plopped down, hanging my head backwards. My neck hurt like hell, leaning against the back railing of the bench, but it felt so good to sit down that I didn't mind it. 30 minutes had passed while I waited for my friend. To pass the time, I pulled out my phone, scrolling through social media. The area I was in was the 2nd floor of the convention center, and the place I was sat was far away from other people. I mean, I saw a few people walk by here and there when I glanced up from my phone, but to be honest, there was really no one. Then, that's when she appeared. I will never forget her. A tall, slender girl with pitch black hair walked over. She walked past my bench, taking a seat on another just across from me. I can't tell you how attractive this girl was. I watched as she sat down, watching every move she made. Yeah, I know, I sound like a creep. But hey, I can look, right? Well, that was when she turns to me, her bright, green eyes staring right into mine. "Hey," she said softly, with a small blush. I waved a simple hello. So, there we are. 2 random strangers sitting across from each other side by side, just staring at one another. I've always had problems starting conversations. I guess she was the same. Then she spoke. "So, do you come here often?" I hadn't even noticed she was getting up and coming closer to me. I was kind of shocked and happy to see a girl coming toward me. Now let me state I don't have any problems with getting ladies, though I'm more a hunter kind of guy, enjoying the game of cat and mouse, yet I didn't mind a girl coming up to me in the least. She sat down next to me, pressing her shoulder against mine. For some strange reason, my heart started to beat fast. I could have sworn I almost smelled a sweet air around her. Was it her shampoo or perfume she was wearing? Whatever it was, I enjoyed it. "Hey, did you hear me?" she asked, her eyes staring right into mine. "Oh, sorry about that." I let out a chuckle, hoping she didn't see me melt in front of her. "No, I don't really come here. I was dragged by a friend of mine who didn't want to come along." "Oh, I see." She looked around the room. "I take it you're alone?" "Yeah." Strange for her to ask me that, knowing I'm sitting here alone. Then she drew ever closer to me, which now her thigh was pressed against mine. Her right hand reached over to mine. She gripped my hand tightly. That sweet smell grew ever so stronger that I started to lose all grasp of everything else around me. My eyes grew heavy. I softly spoke, trying to snap out of this trance. I don't know your name. The girl chuckled. A sinister smile appeared over her face. It's Reyna. Reyna? I chuckled back. Cute name. I'm... Lance. Henry's voice echoed from down the hall. Henry? Henry's voice snapped me out of that sweet intoxication. I no longer felt Reyna's grip on my hand. Turning to the side of me, she sat. I saw that she was gone. I looked around, searching for her. Henry came up to me, leaning forward from running so fast, his breathing rapid. Hey man, sorry for ditching you. They had this awesome panel for a new show, then right next door, the creator of Fighting Soul Street Bros was next door revealing the next installment of the series. Man, I can't wait. He took in a deep gulp of air, letting out a satisfying, that's good. Hey, did you happen to see a girl right here? I asked. Girl? Henry looked around. Didn't really see anyone. Strange. I'm sure there was someone here with me. Henry pressed a hand over my forehead. Man, maybe I did make you walk too much. You're burning up. I swatted away Henry's hand. I jumped from my seat, looking around. I saw nothing, but a few random people walking. I saw no sign of Reyna. You okay? Need to call it a day? I looked down at my hand, the one that Reyna gripped ever so tightly. She was here, right? My hand still ever so warm. I could still smell the lingering scent of that sweet, intoxicating aroma. After that, I returned the next 2 days with Henry. The second day was nothing but walking and me carrying Henry's stuff that he purchased. Yet during that time, I saw no sign of Reyna. I even asked other cosplayers if they might know of her, but they shook their heads. With that second day, I let it go and went about my time. It wasn't until the third and final day that I discovered who Reyna really was. The day that will forever be etched into my memory. I know I said I would never forget the moment I first saw her, but every time my mind flashes to that time, it immediately fast forwards to this day. The day I saw the true cosplayer. Henry and I had gotten to the convention earlier that day. As Henry had informed, the con always shut down early on the last day. We spent the time hanging out with other people we met. I even had fun down in the arcade section they had set up. Henry kicked my ass like usual in those damn fighting games. All in all, I had fun that day. I even made a comment about coming next year with Henry and Michael. During one match, Henry had gotten called away by some guys in his fighting game circle, leaving me alone to wander the ghost town of this convention. I walked back to the second floor, where I met Reyna, walking around in hopes of seeing her again. Then I did. I actually did. From one of the windows that showed off the main street in front of the convention, I spotted Reyna walking. Her long black hair bounced as she walked. She looked so beautiful down there. I quickly ran down the stairs, pushing through a crowd of people. Once outside, I saw Reyna talking with some guy I didn't know. I don't know why, but for some reason, I couldn't let Reyna go. What did she do to me that day? I hid behind a tree watching her, and the guys laugh and chat. I watch as she grabs the man's hand like she did that day to me. Then she began to pull the guy away from other people. She acted like a puppy, making the cutest faces at the guy. She pulled the man away and swayed her hips from side to side. The guy smiled in delight at seeing Reyna move her body about. I wanted to run and shout at the two of them. However, for some reason, since that day we first met, a voice in the back of my mind told me to be careful. Here I am, so enchanted by her beauty, and so frightened by it. Just what was with my attraction with this girl? Standing there mumbling this whole situation around, I lost sight of them in the crowd. I rushed out, searching all around, and managed to catch a glimpse of the top of Reyna's head. I pursued them to a small abandoned building that was 2 blocks away from the convention center. I watched as Reyna pulled the guy inside. I waited a few minutes before moving to the building. I stood outside the door, which stood halfway open. I poked my head in, and was met with the most horrible smell, a mix of rot and other disgusting odors. Walking inside the building, I wonder what would make people come in here to do anything. The smell and the decrepit building that could fall at any minute made me afraid of what could happen. Suddenly images of a horror movie I watched a month back came into my mind. I let out a restless chuckle. Just what I needed at that moment, right? I stood there contemplating what I was doing, and also feeling really dumb. I mean, why should I care what she did or who she was with? I mean, it was just going to be a fling with the two of us anyway. I began to make a roundabout turn when a horrifying roar and a frightful scream echoed like a shockwave in the building. My legs moved without me knowing. I rushed further into the building, searching each room until I came to one where the guy's body was mutilated. His arms and legs torn from his body. His blood splattered on the walls and floor. His torso was cleanly sliced open, spilling out onto the floor. I covered my nose and mouth as the newly added smell of death filled the room. I coughed and gagged at the stench. "It's you." I jumped back, almost slipping on the bile that spilled from the guy's body. Right behind me, watching me for who knows how long, stood Reyna. Reyna, whose beauty enchanted me, was not standing naked, but covered in the blood and guts of that man. She flashed a smile that was both beautiful, but also sinister. "What's going on here?" I said while covering my nose. Reyna stepped toward me, brushing off some of the guy's flesh from her body. His blood dripped down her supple body to the floor. Her eyes narrowed as she looked into mine. For some reason, I felt a terrible feeling in my gut. "Are you hurt?" I asked. Even if the feeling in my gut told me to stay away, I took a step forward. "What happened here? Tell me. Are you okay?" I pulled out my phone. "Do I need to call the police?" Reyna reached out, wrapping her blood-soaked arms around me. Within that moment, that intoxicating aroma came to me again. I felt as my eyes grew heavy, and without realizing it, my phone slipped out of my hand. My face pressed against her soft shoulders. The ooze and fluids that drape over her came over my face. Then as a drop of liquid hit my nose, the only time I was glad to smell anything foul, I snapped out of the strange intoxication. I pushed Reyna off of me. When I did, I didn't feel the soft texture of her skin. No, what I felt was a rough and bumpy like skin texture. Like a toad mixed with that of an insect. I looked at what I had pushed back, only to scream out in horror. Standing before me now, in a horrifying gruesome, I can only describe as chimera of human, mantis, and lizard, was Reyna. A large hunchback, 2 long arms that ended in 2 large sickle blades, 2 hind legs with 3 sharp talons, a fat, flat tail, and a long neck with a face of both human and insect. The jaw of this thing was long and wide, full to the brim with sharp, pointed teeth. A voice echoed from the thing's wide mouth, a voice that matches those coming from an old video recorder. A copy and distorted voice. "What's the matter, Lance?" I jumped back from the former Reyna, only to slip on the blood of the dead guy falling right onto his open torso. I gagged and spit up what I could. I wiped my mouth looking over at whatever the hell this thing was. "What are you?" I asked, as my body began to shake, and fear gripped my voice. The Reyna, or creature, cocked its head. It began to move it like an owl, as it muddled over the question, thinking up an answer to it. A deep growl that seems to rise from its stomach came out of its mouth. "What am I?" The voice that tried asked, "What am I?" It continues, and repeated the question, each time increasing in confusion and anger. I looked around the room as the thing was distracted. I saw the door I came through. I played out the way I could run past, as long with the outcomes that would end with the thing getting me. It all just came down to me running right past it. I had to push my fear away and just go for it. Gritting my teeth, I rose up, pushing the creature down into the ground, surprised by how light it was, and I rushed toward the open door. My body shook when the creature let out a howl, yet I pushed on, and I didn't let anything stop my body this time. I continued to run and run. I could hear the creature chasing after me, its footsteps heavy, making the floor rumble. "Come back here," it howled. That's when I made the one mistake you should never make. The one that always happens in horror movies to give it more suspense. I looked back. I couldn't believe the speed this thing had. It was nearly upon me. Before I knew it, I tripped over a piece of wood that was sticking out. I fell hard on my chest, taking the brunt of the pain. The creature jumps high into the air, landing right on top of me. Its drool and breath fell upon me like rain. My eyes and nose scrunched up in disgust. A long, slender tongue came wiggling out of the creature's mouth. I almost threw up as the tongue went from my mouth, down my neck to my chest. A creepy giggle came from the creature's mouth, almost like it enjoyed seeing my face. The tongue retreated back to its mouth. The creature held its head back and let out a deep roar. Its mouth opened wider than before, showing off the many rows of its teeth. It held back its left right claw, ready to strike me down. I had to do something. Anything. I felt around the floor for anything to use as a weapon. Then my hands felt the prick of wood. I looked to see the beam that had tripped me. It was long with 2 nails sticking out of it. I knew with one hit it would break, but that's all I needed. I gripped it tight in my hand and pulled it off the floor. Before the creature's sickle arm could reach my neck, I swung with all my might, striking the creature. The wood broke, but the piece with the nail stayed stuck in it, in the spot I swung at. Its blood, a black-green ooze, spewed out. I quickly took my chance climbing out from under the creature. I dodged every swing it made with its arms. It screamed out in pain, its howl shaking the entire building. This time, I didn't look back until I had run into a crowd of people. I turned back to the abandoned building one last time before disappearing into the crowd. Later in the coming day, Henry had informed me that the building I had escaped from had been investigated. The police had found multiple bodies inside, with most of them being people who attend the convention for those 3 days. Had I gone with her that first day, I might have been one of those bodies. So glad Henry came running up to me. I haven't even said the scariest part of this story. What scared me the most of this situation happened when Michael had returned. As the 3 of us talked about Henry and I's experience at the con, Michael had asked if we had seen any cosplayers. He went through a list to which Henry had the answers to. That is when I saw a certain page Michael had pulled up. The Amazing Rika was the title of the site. I asked Michael why he didn't ask about that cosplayer, to which he replied, "Oh, her? Yeah, she wouldn't be there. Sad to say, but she's been missing for about a month now. People think she just quit, but it was found out that her place was torn to shreds. Sad, really. She was really nice." Michael then clicked on her page, showing something I wish I never saw. For you see, the girl on the page was Raina. Michael and Henry had to catch me as I almost fell to the floor, my skin turning as white as a sheet. Had this thing killed Raina and taken her form? And why? Did it think taking the form of a beautiful woman would be the easiest way to try to prey? My head, it spins with so many questions that I don't wish to bother you with all of them. So, I'll end with this warning. If you attend a convention and come across a beautiful black-haired woman, beware, for within that beauty lies a beast. Though it shouldn't be too hard to tell who she is, because thanks to that piece of wood, she'll be missing her right eye. How many of you are afraid of the evening, the dark that soon follows sunset, and the vanishing of the bright blue sky into blackness? The eerie quietness it brings only for a startling sound to break through the quiet. Surely, we've all had those moments. Well, for me, my experience was far more than just mere coincidence or imagination. What I am about to tell you has been going on ever since I was young. So if you're faint of heart, I encourage you to stop reading immediately, for what I have to say will most certainly chill even the toughest person straight down to their core. I am choosing to remain anonymous for this, as it is something I do not wish on anyone, and trying to aid me will only result in you being tormented at night just like me. These creatures are very selective of their targets. They only select those who are easily not believable. I will say this, I am almost 18 years old now. Let's start at the very beginning. To give some context to this, I live out in the extreme rural countryside, called the Boonies. At best, there is a neighboring house within 4 miles of each other where we live, too far to make a run in the event of an emergency. It all started when I was 13. I will describe my home first. My family has a house situated on an acre plot of land surrounded on all sides by fields. This specific year they had planted corn, and it was in its mid stages, so it was tall and dark green. It makes for a rather eerie look in the middle of the night. The house is a double-wide trailer with me, my father, my mother, and my grandparents. We have no pets, and there are no outside dogs for protection. My dad took precautions and taught me how to evade wildlife at a very young age, and I happily took his training seriously, as it might save my life. The acre of ground isn't square-shaped. It's more of a rectangle, meaning our front yard is very long, with a gravel driveway leading up the right-hand side looking directly towards the house from the road. The backyard isn't that big, since it was only made to hold the garage where the cars are parked. Now that you have a general idea of our homestead, I can tell you what happened. I was on my way back home from school, which is a good 90-minute ride away from home. The narrow, bending country roads, surrounded by cornfields and forests, is not a pleasant sight if one is faint of heart. You are all probably wondering why school runs so late for us, and it really doesn't. You see, I stay at school for a couple of hours more in order to do homework there. It's a form of extra teaching assignments that furthers my scores by giving me and my teacher the ability to mingle alone and focus on my schooling instead of several classmates at once. I am not the only one, however, as 4 others do the exact same. They are dropped off long before I am, as I live the furthest away. This particular evening was already growing dark, and I knew I'd have to walk up to our long driveway. The bus pulled up, as usual, and turned on its caution lights as I climbed down off the bus. As soon as I reached the other side of the road, the driver didn't bother to make sure I'd make it safe. He just turned off the caution signs and lights and made his way down the road. I watched as he faded into the darkness around a bend, and was greeted by pitch silence, along with the hoots of owls and other things here and there. I sighed and started to make my way up the driveway to the house. I noticed my dad had left his tall work truck in the driveway, not too far away from me. Once I had made it within, I'd say, about 10 feet of the truck, I happened to look up and saw a figure up ahead of me. The figure was at the midsection of the right side of the house, crouched down in the grass. I couldn't tell if it was looking my direction, but I felt my gut sensations start ringing, setting off alarms. My heart started racing. I stood there frozen in fear for what felt like an hour, praying the thing would just go away. It didn't. As quick as a flash, the creature sprang up and started rushing at me with a loud, horrific shriek. I quickly ducked underneath the truck and hid, trying not to make a sound. I heard the footsteps rapidly closing in, and then, as quickly as they started, they just stopped. I hid under the truck, struggling to keep my composure, as I had remembered my dad's teachings on dealing with wild animals. But that was the issue. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't an animal, and it surely wasn't a person. I felt the sudden urge to look up, and when I did, I saw 2 feet standing at the front of the vehicle, facing towards me. My heart jumped into my throat as I struggled to hold myself still and calm. The body of the creature was tall, lanky, and bone-thin, but it was bone-chilling to see. As quickly as it began, the creature took a right turn and bolted off in the direction of the field. I heard it slam into the corn, and after a while, I didn't hear anything else. I quickly checked my surroundings, making sure nothing else was around me before quietly moving out from under the truck and bolting as fast as my legs would carry me to the house. I heard shrieking behind me, as what sounded like several footsteps closing in at a rapid speed. I managed to get into the porch and turn around to lock the door, only to be greeted by what looked like 7 to 10 different sets of piercing yellow eyes. The creature stood no taller than 4 feet, but still had a figure I can't explain. They stood as still as statues for a few minutes, before, one by one, bolting back into the direction of the field. I went inside quietly and didn't tell my family anything that had happened. For several days on end, I had reoccurring night terrors about them, and it was endless. Dreams of being chased through the cornfields with no escape, being torn apart and dangled in a tree somewhere for the cops to find my mutilated corpse. By far the most terrifying experience of my life, and one of many of my encounters with these flesh-eating monsters. Before these incidents, I would say I didn't believe in urban legends, horror stories, or paranormal activity. Now I know better. Now I know that there are things out there left undiscovered by humankind. Since then I have stopped late night tutoring at my school and started coming home like the normal kids. I still have encounters even to this day, and each experience is more terrifying than the last. I can only hope you, the reader, pray for my safety. I have no idea what they are or even what they want, but I could swear they want me. If you live in the country, don't come home late. They're waiting for you. There was a strange wailing sound coming from the room next to mine. At first, I thought the guy in there had sneaked in a pet, and it was crying to be let out to pee or something. Yet it never stopped. Like, ever. An animal at least has to draw breath now and then, but this noise was thin, high-pitched, and endless. It wasn't loud enough that people in other rooms could hear it, but it pervaded mine, making a perpetual background noise as I went about my days. I assumed it must be some kind of game sound effect, since his TV was pushed up against the wall we shared, but when we had a power cut and the noise kept going, I knew I was wrong. It was there when I left for class each morning, and still going when I got back to dorms. It even lasted into the night, cutting through my consciousness as I tried to sleep. Eventually, after a few days of trying to be civil and dropping hints when I saw my neighbor in the corridor, I'd had enough. I headed out in my pajamas and banged a fist on his door. It took a few minutes for him to answer. I put that down to it being 2 a.m. When he answered, however, he was fully clothed and his lights were on. And I do mean all. Every bulb blazed, including a desk crammed full of lamps. His bookshelf had been cleared of books and filled instead with burning candles. From his ceiling light, he had hung a glitter ball, reflecting yet more light around the room. A large halogen flashlight dangled from his hand like a cujo. "What?" he demanded. I was momentarily lost for words. "What, man?" I refocused on my neighbor. He looked haggard, like he had not slept in ages. His hair was unkempt, and his sweatshirt had food stains all down the front, as if it had not been washed in so long that fresh spills had covered several layers of old. When I met his eyes, I saw a host of broken capillaries that had turned the whites almost completely red. There's a noise coming from in here, dude. It's making it impossible for me to sleep. I've tried to be nice, but I hit my limit. Could you, I don't know, shut it off or something?" I looked around, trying to figure out where the noise could be coming from. He stepped in my way. "I don't hear anything." "Dude, it's definitely coming from in here. It got louder when you opened the door. Come on, man. Don't make this a big thing. I have class at 9 a.m. Just shut off whatever it is and we'll say no more about it." He narrowed his eyes at me. "There's no noise, dickhead." Then he shut the door in my face. "Wow, nice," I said to the scratched up wood. "Real nice." With no other recourse, I went back to bed, resolving to complain to campus authorities in the morning. I got a couple hours of sleep, which wasn't nearly enough for my heavy class schedule, so I filed a complaint online before heading to the library that afternoon. When I finally got back to my dorm hours later, it was to find a commotion going on outside. A crowd had gathered. I pushed my way through to see my neighbor being loaded into the back of a police car. He thrashed and fought, kicking out with his legs and throwing his head back since his hands were cuffed behind his back. An ambulance stood nearby, paramedics loading someone on a stretcher into the back. "What the hell is going on?" I asked of no one in particular. He beamed campus security with a flashlight. Said an eager blonde girl, snapping the scene rapidly with her phone. "Broke the guy's skull." "What? Why?" "They got a complaint about him, and when they came to investigate, the guy went totally crazy, locked himself in his room, and refused to come out." My neighbor's voice floated over the heads of the crowd. "No, you have to let me stay here. If I'm not here, it'll kill me. It's scared of the dark. I have to stay here. Please, you have to." His words were cut off by the squad car door. The crowd took a while to disperse after the ambulance and police departed. We were let back into the building after that, and I cautiously approached my room. My neighbor's was strung with yellow police tape, and though the door was closed, I could see the lock had been forced, and the handle dangled at an odd angle. I paused for a moment, wondering why he had resorted to violence so swiftly. I barely knew the guy. I think he told me his name at the beginning of the semester, but it had long since tumbled out of my head, pushed by lecture notes, essay preparation, and manifold other things more important to my daily life. He had always been so nondescript, as to be practically invisible before that stupid noise started. Certainly not someone I would have imagined clubbing a security guard badly enough to put him in the hospital. My curiosity got the better of me and I nudged his door open with my foot. Sure enough, all the lights, lamps, and candles were still there, though everything had been switched off or doused. His room was oddly still, the air heavy with silence. My breathing seemed inordinately loud, and I fled to my own room, muttering about my cowardice as I slammed the door and switched on the radio I had started using to drown out the wailing noise. There was no wailing now, but I felt more comfortable with music than that oppressive silence. My sleep that night was no better than when the noise had kept me awake. I stared at the ceiling for hours, something prickling the back of my mind, never clear enough for me to figure out what it was, but off-putting enough that sleep did not come easily. I kept feeling like something was wrong. The way you do when you leave the house, and then wonder an hour later whether you remembered to close the garage door. The next morning, I was more exhausted than ever. I went down to the campus coffee shop for something highly caffeinated and a breakfast burrito. Whilst waiting in line, I opened my phone to check my emails. One of my professors has a horrible habit of canceling classes at the last minute, leaving us to arrive at the stupidly early hour she had previously set, only to find a note on the door. The way I was feeling, kinda hoped she had pulled this again. There was no email from her, but while I was distracted, the line had moved forward, and someone tapped me on the shoulder from behind. "Hey, buddy." What? I turned to see a girl with electric blue hair and more piercings than I could count. She gestured at the space in front of me, and I clumsily apologized before moving forward. "Sorry." "No problem. Hey, didn't I see you yesterday when the police were here? I swear you were standing like right behind me." "Oh," I said vaguely, not really interested in conversation. "Yeah, the guy who got arrested is my neighbor. He lived in the room next to mine. Fucking psychopath." Her face twisted up in sympathy. "Pretty awful what happened, huh?" "I guess. Is the security guard okay?" "That guy? Oh yeah, he'll be fine. I mean about your neighbor." "Huh? Didn't you hear?" Her expression switched to one of salacious anticipation. The way people look when they see on Twitter that their favorite celebrity has been outed for something awful, and they get to publicly insult them without reprisal. "He's dead." I nearly dropped my phone. "What?" Cut his own throat in his cell at the police station yesterday evening. There's a big stink about why they let a disturbed kid keep a knife on him after being arrested. It's all over social media. Hashtag why no frisk, dude. Wow. I didn't know what to think. He really did that? Uh-huh. It's totally messed up. Yeah. I pushed my hair from my eyes, feeling sweat suddenly prickling in my hairline. Messed up. Something about what she had told me made me really uneasy. And I don't just mean the fact that my neighbor had committed suicide. Like I said, I didn't know much about him, so I couldn't judge whether he had seemed suicidal or whether this was out of character for him. His behavior since this all started had been weird, so maybe him offing himself was an inevitable end to his story, and I was just a bit player in the third act. No, something else rankled at me. Some nebulous sensation that I couldn't name. It felt like something about this situation was amiss, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. In class, the other students were talking about the assault, the arrest, and the suicide. It had unsettled everyone. Deaths on college campuses aren't uncommon, but ours was a small institution, so word spread quickly and sank deep. By the end, I could remember nothing of what the professor had said, but gossip from the other students around me clanged around inside my head, like church bells tolling for my neighbor's funeral. I checked my phone when class let out of grim curiosity. I typed hashtag why no frisk into Twitter, and discovered the girl in the coffee shop had been right. People beyond our college were talking about it too. Why the guy had not been searched for weapons before being put in a cell. Why had police been so negligent? Why were they insisting they had properly followed protocol when his death proved it was a lie? I lingered on a tweet thread by someone from the local township who was accusing the authorities of deliberately leaving my neighbor armed in the hopes he would kill himself because of some crackpot theory about boomers trying to kill off Generation Z. Others joined in below, some claiming the knife had been missing, and others saying they'd heard there was no knife at all, and that he had been found with his throat cut, but no weapons nearby. I turned off my phone at that point, and shoved it deep into my pocket, unable to stomach anymore. My dorm was eerily quiet when I got back. Everyone was locked in their rooms, either working or processing the death or whatever. My brain hurt, so I headed upstairs at a speed that suggested a couple of hellhounds were nipping at my heels. Outside my neighbor's door, someone had put a folding chair, and other students had bought tiny bouquets of flowers and condolence cards to leave on it. I figured the colleague faculty would give it all to his parents later, but for now, it was apparently the way some people had chosen to process this unusual and tragic event. I stood staring at it for a moment. The door behind the chair was still half open, the way I had left it last night. I squinted into the darkness. It seemed different than before, though I could not say why. Less thick, if that makes any sense. I shook my head and moved off to my own room. The sun was setting by the time I had showered. I filled a little kettle I kept hidden in my room with water from the bathroom faucet and set it to boil while I poured ramen noodles into a mug. I was just reaching for a fork I kept behind the books on my shelf when I heard it. A thin, jittery wailing. It sounded like it was coming from outside my window, but when I looked out, the last streaks of light on the horizon, nobody was there. I must be more tired than I thought, I muttered, resolving to eat my ramen and then go straight to bed. Maybe sleep would quiet my addled mind, but the wailing didn't stop. In fact, it got louder. As it did so, it stopped jittering so much and became a choking, sobbing sound. I went to the window and threw it open to look out, but there was absolutely nobody around. When I shut it again, the wailing was even louder, like the source was in the room with me. I rolled around, trying to get a bead on where it might be coming from, and nearly fell over in shock. A little girl stood in the middle of my room. She was tiny and skinny, in a loose-fitting white dress and black buckle shoes. Her thin calves were not big enough to keep her socks up, and they had pooled around her ankles, revealing dozens of livid, red cuts that crisscrossed her legs until they disappeared under her skirt. Her arms were the same, culminating in huge gouges in her wrists, as though someone had scooped out chunks of flesh, revealing tendons and severed veins that flopped against her skin as she moved. One side of her head had been stoved inwardly, leaving a bloody crater in her skull and soaking her hair so thoroughly with blood that it was impossible to tell what color it was supposed to be. I don't like the dark, she stammered through her tears, one arm raised to press against her eyes, as if she was frightened to let anyone see her cry. Through her torso, I could vaguely see my desk. Bad things happen in the dark. What the? I breathed. Oh my god. I don't like the dark, she wailed, elongating the vowel into a noise I recognized all too well. She dropped her arm and I stared at the empty carved out wounds where her eyes should have been. I don't like the dark. Bad things happen in the dark. Her wailing hit a pitch that made my ears hurt. I stumbled backwards, ironically away from the light switch, and hit the wall with my back. I slid down it a little, temples throbbing at the noise. It wasn't like normal sound. It seemed to dig into my brain, radiating inward until I felt like my head might explode. I screwed my eyes shut. Don't shut your eyes in the dark. Never shut your eyes in the dark. The dark is where the bad things happen. He likes the dark, the little girl shrieked. He took my eyes so I could only see the dark. He knew I was scared, so he took the light away. Please bring back the lights. I opened my eyes and gasped. Outside, the sun had completely set now, and the corner of my room seemed to pulse with shifting shadows. Something silvery glittered in the center, winking in and out, there and then not. He's here. He's here. The little girl's voice hit a new peak. Please bring back the light. I don't like the dark. He comes in the dark. The shadows coalesced into something vaguely human. In one hand, it gripped a knife. It turned an opaque face in my direction, limbs contorting in a parody of a walk. Its other hand jerked out, reaching for me. I don't like the dark. Gritting my teeth, I vaulted over the bed and hit the light switch. The bulb flared to life. It wasn't a very powerful bulb, but it was enough to bring pallid light to the room. In an instant, the corner was empty. No knife-wielding shady figure anywhere. I whirled to look at the center of the room, but the little girl was gone too. At least, her body was. I could still hear her yelling that she didn't like the dark, and that bad things happen in it. Her voice was more distant with the light on, but I could still hear it. I could still hear it now. I turned on my bathroom light and left the door open, which seemed to make her even quieter. But her voice never really goes away. It's still going now, even though it's past dawn. Not sure what I should do. I could tell someone on campus, but it sounds completely crazy. A little ghost girl and something else were haunting my room. I think they used to haunt my neighbor until the shadowy something murdered him. Who would believe me? It sounds like something out of a bad horror movie. All I know is I'm buying some more lamps and flashlights tomorrow. A lot of lamps and flashlights, and I'm looking into whether I can transfer my credits to another school. The most terrifying idea to me growing up has always been losing my grasp on reality. I'm not exactly sure why. I didn't witness any particularly disturbing demonstrations of hysteria or insanity. It was just something that I instinctively feared the day I learned of the possibility. I think now this may have been some form of subconscious protection, or aversion to things that might trigger a lapse with reality. I drove across the country to live with my brother after trying and failing to start my own business. Turns out the world did not need another indie game development studio, and a guy who doesn't even know how to code can't attach much media attention or decent coders. So I moved. And not surprising to anyone who knows me, the trip was completely uneventful. I don't like being surprised most of the time, and while I don't schedule every minute of my day, I do have a spreadsheet of the movies I've seen. I'm organized in a chaotic kind of way. Wait, sorry, trying to focus. That's been more difficult since last weekend. I went out with my brother and his friends to a football game. Did you know soccer was in English? As in from England word? Yeah, not an Americanism. Have your dumb word back. Damn it, squirrel again. And now my phone is blowing up about this virus. This is going to be impossible. Okay, the story. Focus on the story. We went to a football game, soccer, and we wanted to improve the experience, so we smoked some weed. Yay for not stupid states. That part of the day was great. Felt like I was in a Wes Anderson film. Colors were more vibrant. My brain made up little vignettes of random people I saw. The world seemed like a happy place. Then, when I went to the bathroom, I happened to see a guy smoking and bummed a cig off of him. Bad habit, I know. I hate the smell and taste of ashtray it leaves, but it's part of the story. So I bummed a cigarette off the guy, and we got to talking. I honestly don't remember how the conversation got to Telerians, but I was incredibly bored one day and read most of the Arrowwood entries for Datura, and at that particular moment, retelling what I had read, I found the stories hilarious. Datura's primary effect is to make you hallucinate without the conscious ability to recognize the hallucinations as false. It makes you delirious and can last an entire day, with side effects lasting days or weeks. Sober, they read like horror movies, but I was profoundly high. This guy laughs right along with me, and then suddenly his face became stone cold sober. You think that's funny? He said that question in a weird way. It stuck out to me. It wasn't threatening, but there was a hint of challenge in it, as though he were prompting me to stand and debate the opinion. Yeah, I really do. It must have been awful for them during the trip, but they got a hell of a story from it. Yeah. Want your own story? He said it in such a casual way that I replied before even thinking. Bad habit, that. Of course. What's life without a few great stories? Try this. It's called Shattered. He handed over a vial containing a long shard of cloudy amber. Looks like normal shatter. Or wax. Honey. Shattered. Trust me. This is a whole new class of awareness. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at the line. Thankfully, I was wearing sunglasses. I can be a bit smug, I guess. Maybe that's why he gave me the vial. Turns out all I had to do was eat the stuff like candy. I offered to pay him, but he declined. That should have been a red flag. Strangers don't give drugs to kids. But for some reason, all the childhood propaganda and myths do not prevent me from taking strange drugs from a stranger. Stranger danger. Yeah. Probably should have remembered that phrase. So I took it, went back to the game, and enjoyed life for another 30 minutes. Oh, I forgot to describe the guy. Average white dude, sunglasses, average height, dark hair, ironically rocking a corduroy jacket. Except for the jacket, I pretty much described myself and half of the male population between the age of 20 and 35. We were even both drinking IPAs. Damn, I'm basic. Wait, damn it. Right. 30 minutes of enjoying floating through my mind, like flying through clouds. Lost it. Then I did lose it. All of a sudden, the sensation of something being incredibly, but subtly wrong pervaded my mind. The voice coming from my left, where my brother had been just a second before, was off tone. His voice didn't sound that high, right? And he didn't have a speed bump 3/4 of the way through his sentences. You know, where someone has a catch when they talk, like, hey, that sounds just like this guy I know. Glanced over at my brother, and everything seemed just about right. Only just about right. Not right. I looked past him to his friend and saw the same thing. Like they were almost perfect knockoff brand humans. Look up Uncanny Valley, and then imagine seeing your own family and friends that way. I'll wait. No, actually I won't. That's dumb. You're reading this after I've written it. Such a dumb joke. Oh well. Their voices seemed more regular and accurate when I looked directly at them, but when I looked back at the soccer field, the pitches went wonky. It was like the act of watching them made them more real, but when my attention was focused on something else, my brain noticed more differences. I think of it like when you want to look at something in the dark, so you look just to the side of it rather than right at it, then you can see it in your peripheral vision. The reason for that is there's more of the things, cones, rods, either way. The ones that see color are bunched in the center of the eye, and the ones that detect light are more dense than the outring of the retina. So your peripheral vision is actually better at night than direct focus. So yeah, like that. They were mostly accurate copies of my brother and his friend, but focusing on the differences made them disappear. This sounds like a good thing because it meant I was consciously fighting this crazy emotional storm in my brain. I knew it wasn't possible or even remotely sane to believe someone had gone to the effort of replacing my brother and his friend with doubles. The problem with emotions is they don't listen very well to top-down control. Top-down is a phrase in psychology to describe conscious control of the nervous system. Bottom-up, for example, is hunger. You don't have control over when your body is hungry. It just is. And lets you know when it's time to put fuel in the tank. Think of the conscious mind like a driver in an incredibly complex car. We can move the steering wheel, control where we are looking, and are free to make commentary to ourselves about the scenery. Aside from that, we aren't really in control of anything. Emotions are one of the outputs of the system we rely on, but don't control or understand. In that moment, in the stadium stands, my emotions were shouting at me that something was very wrong. That my brother and his friend had been replaced by imposters, that I was seeing things I wasn't meant to see. I've never had a panic attack. I can't imagine how terrible that must be, not being able to control your body's response to a non-existent threat. But I was probably as close as I've ever been. My heart was racing. I started sweating. I couldn't stop swallowing. I felt like I couldn't get a full breath no matter how many little sips of air I forced into my lungs. My hands got sweaty and clammy. I briefly wondered if I was sick, but I knew this was all in response to the drug. Shattered. I began to wonder why it had that name. Why the hell did I take drugs from a stranger? A smug stranger. Obviously, don't take life advice from me. I couldn't help fixating on the small details that were wrong with my brother and his friend. The space between the hairs on my brother's scalp was wrong. His hair was naturally thick. His sentences had those funny pause 3/4 through. His voice was the wrong timbre. and he put the stress on the wrong syllable for our accent. The cadence was almost right, but in the same way a good impersonator is different from a great impersonator. Close but noticeably not the original person. To my dismay, the effect from Shattered partnered with the high from the weed to create a chaotic symphony. Imagine Ride of the Valkyries mixed with house music and Beethoven's Ode to Joy on violin. That's what it felt like. I think I should mention I've noticed odd effects from weed before. It's really the only drug I've played around with before. For whatever reason, THC hits me in an extremely powerful way. When I get too high, I enter a daydreaming state where my mind creates a constant stream of imagined scenarios, conversations, actions, decisions, and I can almost see them playing out. I think this may be because for whatever reason, I don't have much of an active imagination when sober. Like I thought for the longest time the idea of a mind's eye was some concept I had fundamentally misunderstood. I couldn't imagine that people could picture things in their mind, some with near lifelike accuracy based on subjective reports. Finally, I learned that I apparently am one of many with what is colloquially called aphantasia. I figured out as a young kid that if I closed my eyes and focused really hard, I could make a blue dot appear on the red-black darkness of my eyelids. From there, I progressed to mentally picturing series of dots, kind of like a dot matrix printer, and with those dots, create wireframes of objects. Over many years, I've gotten to the point where I can actually picture things in my mind, with or without my eyes shut. It takes a ton of focus. It isn't nearly the same as a daydream. Wait, damn it. Right. THC for some reason seems to unlock my imagination, to the point where if I am just a little too high, I will imagine entire conversations with people. Most of the time I can tell a difference between the daydreams and what actually happened, but one time, I also asked an ex if I had made out with her friend at a party. Yeah, turns out you shouldn't ask those kinds of questions, even if it obviously had not happened outside my brain. Shattered, whatever the hell it was, boosted that effect and added the fun flavor of paranoia. I've never been paranoid high before. I pretty much just turned into a Labrador retriever. This was like being at the bottom of a deep well with the black waters rising all around me. I had to struggle to stay above those black waters of fear, to not sink into the turbulent currents of my swelling panic. It was kind of like being in a dark club where someone has noticed a fire in another room, and only one edges of the crowd can hear the shouts. Then the word spreads through the crowd, whispers of concern quickly replaced by shouts. Fire. There is a fire and the mass of humanity reacts like a river breaking through a dam. The doors are not wide enough to let everyone through. People are shoving, shouting, shifting like some great many-limbed beast. The beast is slow, the beast is dumb, but the beast is incredibly strong and powered by fear. That was what it felt like as my mind fully came under the effects of Shattered. Shattered. The piece of my ignorant existence was shattering to pieces around me, and the world was irreparably broken. I knew there was no chance my life warranted hiring and training actors. Didn't have the delusion of grandeur common to schizophrenic episodes, at least as far as an undergrad degree in psychology could tell me. Not a doctor. It didn't stop my mind from seeing the people closest to me as imposters. There actually is a disorder called Capgras syndrome, where the individual expresses a belief that those who should be close to them are in fact imposters or frauds, but that is usually caused by brain injury or schizophrenia. Wondering if you are actively experiencing a psychotic break is not a great way to enjoy a Sunday afternoon at the stadium. I felt like I was shifting my eyes too much, that somehow my behavior would give away the fact that I knew. Give it away to who? Doesn't matter. Why would anyone care? Don't know. Doesn't matter. Can I please get off this ride? No. My brother later told me I managed to mumble some conversation over the rest of the match, but I had not been prime company. That's fair. I was having an existential crisis after all. The issue is, and this is why I am writing this, that the feeling of wrongness with the world did not abate. It has been a week, and I still feel as if everything and everyone is slightly off. It's as though I slipped through some crack in the cosmic latticework and fell into an ever so slightly different universe. Some odd things aren't matching up with my memories as well. This girl I definitely did not date, but did know in the biblical way, is texting me like we are dating. Constantly. That was not a thing before. Pictures of me with my friends and family look somehow different. The wrong colors, slightly different positions, different amounts of light, and a million other indiscernible details tell me the world is still not quite right. I've managed to keep the panic at bay by convincing myself that even if I am in a different world, or I broke my brain, it doesn't really make any difference. That doesn't stop my mind from digging away at now imagined missed possibilities, or the idea that it is somehow important that my view of the world was shifted so drastically. I can't feel close to anyone, because everyone isn't who they are supposed to be. Strangers are fine, but when you can't make a stranger a friend because all of your friends are strangers, the worst part is a part of my mind doesn't know what to believe. The most logical answer is that the drug, Shattered, really should have paid more attention to the name. It somehow broke the part of my brain that recognizes people, or I experienced a psychotic break. Schizophrenia can have an onset in the late 20s and early 30s. The less logical, but somehow deceptively convincing explanation is that I did in fact slip into a slightly different parallel universe. If that happened, was it just my conscious mind that swapped bodies? That's not logical though. Either way, knowing what might have happened doesn't help get rid of the feeling of strangeness. I am a stranger in a strange land, a shattered land I once knew as home. God help me. It has been 9 hours. 9 hours of complete torture. I'll be the first to admit that I am an anxiety-ridden person, so this pandemic stuff has had me on the edge ever since the first case in the US was announced. So last night, I really needed a respite from all of the chaos, and with the wife and her families across the pond for a month, I contacted the only person I know on a casual level. Denny isn't exactly a friend. I met him 3 years ago when I was in a really bad place. Living felt like pain, and the only thing that soothed the pain was alcohol. So I spent a lot of time at the only bar within 12 miles of my rural home, of which Denny owned. 4 times a week after work, I would drink myself silly there. After a few months of that, Denny cut me off, and took me under his wing, contacting therapists he knew, Alcoholics Anonymous, anyone that could help. I actually met my future wife at the latter, so Denny really has been a big help to my life. Every now and then, when I know I need to spend some time with someone, Denny will close down the bar, invite me over, whip up some of the best virgin drinks you could imagine, and just talk. That's exactly what we did last night, but when I first arrived, I could tell something was wrong. Denny was incredibly jumpy and wiry. When I asked him if anything was wrong, he just said, "House isn't right." He wouldn't elaborate any further, but talked about anything else just fine. But whenever I brought up the fact that he looked terrified, that was the only phrase he responded with. After about 6 hours of talking about current events, hobbies, and my many anxieties, I finally left the bar around 3, but right before I left, Denny asked me to hold on. I did, and turned towards him, only to see Denny looking absolutely depressed. He stared at me with that expression for a few seconds, and then said in an incredibly pained voice, "I'm so sorry." For as long as I've known him, I had never seen Denny in any kind of negative mood, so this shook me so much that I kind of just ran out of the bar without asking what was wrong. Standing outside my door, I started feeling a bit feverish. The whole ride home I felt fine, though a bit creeped out because of Denny, but outside of that, it was a normal drive. But facing my front door, my body felt like it was filled with some kind of poison, so naturally I rushed inside before I passed out on my front porch. Now here's where I need to describe the layout of my house. The front door opens into the living room, which has 4 doors leading to other parts of the house, and those rooms further lead into other areas. I am lucky to have been born into a wealthy family, which afforded me the luxury of indulging in my love of surreal architecture. It's not for everyone, but I personally love it. Anyways, as I get into the house, I could feel my body giving out. Black spots appeared in my vision. My movement became robotic. I was passing out. So I rushed over to my couch the best I could and just collapsed onto it. For the next 30 minutes, I did breathing exercises that my therapist had taught me. I slowly groped the couch, which helped ground me. Finally, after about 45 minutes after the ordeal started, the panic attack fully passed, and I was able to move around without shaking like a leaf. The attack had sapped all of my energy, so I just wanted to fall into my bed and sleep. So I headed towards the door on the far right, which leads to my bedroom. As I approached the door, the sickly feeling started up again, so I rushed forward and flew the door open, hoping that I could just jump into bed and calm my brain down. But something didn't feel right about my bedroom, so my eyelids popped open. I was not in my bedroom. I was standing in the middle of my living room, right in front of the couch. I was a bit confused, but I chalked it up to being tired, so I rushed towards my bedroom door and repeated the same action. Again, I found myself standing in the middle of the living room. I started salivating a lot. I could tell that my stomach was starting to sour, so ignoring the mind-bending weirdness that was filling my head, I decided to run to the kitchen and grab a cup of water to avoid vomiting. Middle of my living room. I was panicking now, but I had control of my faculties, so I composed myself, neglecting the feeling of my stomach knotting itself up, and calmly walked over to my bedroom door, swung it open, and just stood there. Big mistake. Blinding light poured from the opening. No matter where I went in the living room, I couldn't escape it. Tears in my eyes, I ran through the opening. After vomiting on the couch, I started talking to myself. The news broke your brain, I said to myself as I pulled my phone out and ran towards the only door I felt like I trusted, the front door. I took a deep breath as I passed through the doorway, and delight filled my body as I felt cold air hit my face, and the sound of crickets on my property. The familiar sound of my shoes hitting the wooden porch floor. I opened my eyes, and a grin spread across my face. I was standing outside. Stupid idiot, I said to myself as I re-entered my house, thinking that somehow my brain hadn't recalibrated itself. I confidently walked to my bedroom door and entered. I let out a loud yelp when I felt my living room's carpet under my feet. Tears began flowing freely. Snot filled my nose. I was losing it. I whipped out my phone and was prepared to call my wife, but quickly realized that I would regret bringing this madness to her, so I called the only person that had ever seen me so vulnerable. Denny. My heart pumped hard and fast as the phone rang. I looked down in disgust at the pile of vomit I had left on the couch, but my eyes swung straight when my call was picked up. Denny, listen, I need your help, I said. I probably sounded like I just murdered someone. Instead of a response, on the other side, all I heard was sobs. Denny, what's going on? Listen, I'm feeling the same way. I started, but he interrupted. Stop, Eric. Stop. I'm so damn sorry, he said between sobs, nearly choking on his words. What do you mean? Denny, please, I need you to... Again, he butted in. You need to find someone else. You weren't my first choice, but when you called, I had to. The bar was my loop. I'm so sorry. Then the line cut. I tried calling again, but I'm guessing he blocked me. I went over his words in my head, over and over, trying to make sense of everything, and about an hour later, I furiously came to the correct conclusion. Denny's bar is connected to his house. The bar area was the room he couldn't leave. He had planned on finding someone else to infect. I'm not sure who infected him, but I wasn't his first choice. Though the fact that he had let me come in contact with him in the first place still disgusted me. Physical contact. It had to be passed on through physical contact. Don't ask me how I know. I just know. I didn't want to. I spent hours running through the house, making different routes, trying to go in different orders, hoping it would stop, but I can't do it anymore. My mind feels like it is cracking. The closest town is 20 minutes away. The only problem is, I don't know a single person there, so they can't contact me once it begins. I don't want to, but I need it to end. I'm so sorry.